Danny, we're on to the final part of this show.
Woo! We made it.
Where we're going to be discussing the pound for pound listings. I know it's very subjective. People have their own opinions on it. And the reason why we wanted to bring this up right towards the end is because it's so subjective. At this present time, we are going to try to get Umar Sadiq on, who's actually abroad at this present time. So he's trying to come on. We're hoping that works out. But we brought in somebody who's very well versed, somebody who's been around in the boxing industry for a long time. He's a commentator. I'm sure he's done a bit of writing in the past. But he's well known in the industry and very well respected. It's none other than Andy Clarke. Andy, thank you very much for joining us.
No problem, fellas. No problem.
That was some intro, wasn't it?
It was great. Yeah, I was loving that.
I'll take my 20 quid later, mate. You can transfer it over later. Andy, thank you very much for joining us. First of all, we're in lockdown again. How's life treating you at this present time?
Pretty much the same as it's treating most other people, I would imagine. It's the boredom is really the only thing I could kind of pick out that I would have any justification, I think, in complaining about, because throughout this whole thing, I've been lucky. I've not really been affected by it. I don't know anyone who's had it really badly. I don't know anyone who's passed away from it. And it hasn't really impacted on my life other than my income. And it's impacted on so many people's incomes. Other than that, I've got through it, or am getting through it, pretty unscathed. And you've got to be thankful for that if that's the situation you're in.
Of course, and before we continue, we hope that everyone's staying safe, and if anyone has got family members who have got COVID, our prayers are with them, our thoughts are with them. But Andy, we brought you on to such a subjective topic in regards to the pound for pound rankings. There's been a lot of people online just go back and forth on this topic forever. But in your eyes, first of all, what do you make of this whole pound for pound thing?
Well, it is really interesting and it's fun. The pedant in me, the rational, logical, facts and evidence man in me, and I am one, basically leads me to conclude that ultimately it's pointless, because weight divisions exist for a reason. It's a cliche, but it's true. And also, if you're trying to work out who the better fighter between two boxers is, between two individuals is, then you would judge that by who would win if they had a fight. So if a heavyweight fights a lightweight, it doesn't matter how technically good the lightweight is, the heavyweight would win. Therefore, the heavyweight is a better fighter, because were they to fight, the heavyweight would win that fight. So with that regard, it doesn't really make any logical sense. You can, I think, compare who is the better technical boxer and assess those skills. And look at that, because you can look at all sorts of facets of that and come to, I think, an informed and educated opinion. But I've just kind of summed up there, really, in listing my objections to it, why this is as subjective as it is. And what I find really interesting about it is that with normal rankings, with individual weight divisions, I'm very much a kind of body of work man. There is an expiry date on work. It doesn't remain as valid forever as it did at the time it was done. But with pound for pound rankings, you are obviously, of course, to a large extent guessing, and you have to try and decide how much weight you give to something that's really recent, as opposed to how much weight you give to something that's been achieved in the past in a different weight division, which they're not going to revisit. We could tie ourselves in knots about it all afternoon, and people argue about it strenuously. And that's good, because, we need things to argue about at the best of times, but definitely at the minute.
Just before we continue with you, Andy, we've actually got Umar Sadiq on the line. So let me just introduce him. Umar Sadiq, all the way from Mexico, I think. You're in Mexico training out there, aren't you? Is that correct?
Sí, estoy aquí en México entrenando duro.
There we go. Umar, how are you, my friend? How's things out there? We're in lockdown at this present time. How's things out in Mexico?
No, I picked it. I'm good, man. Everything's blessed out here. I came out to Playa del Carmen, which is a town next to Cancun.
Okay.
And it's beautiful. I literally just woke up, by the way. Well, not just woke up. I just got out of my meditation after waking up. So it's the morning here. It's about 9 a.m. thereabouts, or just past. And I found a nice boxing gym that welcomed me in. So I'm getting a lot of work done out there. And then around that, you just do what you do when you're in a, tropical climate. Go to the beach and all of that stuff. Eat good food.
Umar, we're actually talking about the topic of pound for pound. I just asked Andy his sort of opinion on what he thought about the whole pound for pound thing. But before we ask you, what's the latest with yourself? Have you got anything lined up in regards to dates for 2021 or when you're next fighting?
Yeah, just all super middleweights be on notice. So after my last fight, as you guys know, but some of the viewers might not, I had a bit of a headache, an unusual headache that I usually I haven't had before. So I just asked my team to go to the hospital just to make sure they were all good.
Okay.
And it said that there was the report from the brain scan, MRI scan, was that I had a mild hematoma, which I didn't know what was. So basically, it's a bruising to the surface of the brain, but not the actual brain, but tissues that go over the brain. So because of that, the boxing board suspended my license until they got continued to. I don't really understand the process, to be honest, but I've felt fine since. It's just it's a formality that I've had to deal with, which has meant that I've been out of the ring since September. And I was waiting for the board to let me know when to have a new scan, and they did that at the end of November. So I took one in December. The clinic I went to have given me the results, and the results are that there are no differences between my brain scan that was done in December 2020 to the one that was done in 2019 when I was getting my license in 2019. So that means I'm fine. But the boxing board have their own system, which is old as anything, because, I mean, I've got the report. It says scans are fine. You're good to go. But now I'm still waiting for the boxing board, and God knows when they actually evaluate and give me back my license. So until that happens, what I'm doing is I'm training, staying active, working on my craft, making sure that I'm using this time wisely so that when I come back, I'm going to be a better version of myself. And, with or without the boxing board, I'm planning to fight before the summer and then hopefully get to come back and fight in the UK by the summer. But, that's dependent on the boxing board. What I do know is that I've always said that if, for whatever health reasons, I'm unable to box, I would stop. But if my brain's kind of identical to the one that it was in 2019, between 2019 and 2020 after the fight, then as far as I'm concerned, I'm healthy. So the boxing board really is what I'm waiting for, and then we can get it cracking.
On our live chat at the moment, someone's already chipped in with their pound for pound list, which maybe gives us a good jumping off point. Quan Big Guns, don't think that's his or her real name, has got Terence Crawford at number 1, Errol Spence at number 2, and that's an argument in itself, and Canelo Alvarez at number 3. So starting with Andy Clarke, what do you make of that? Having taken all your objections to pound for pound lists aside, of course.
So my top 3 would be Canelo. I'd have Canelo at 1. I'd have Inoue at 2, I think, and I'd have Teofimo Lopez at 3. And like I said, it's a combination of looking at body of work, but also what people have done recently. And with Canelo, I just think Canelo's the best fighter in the world, bar none. And that's why I would have him at number 1. And he's done a lot in a lot of different weight divisions. And also he did something major this year, beating Callum Smith. I know he did it comfortably, but Callum Smith is a very good fighter, so that was a major win. In a way, he's blazed the trail through 3 different weight divisions now. You look at the way he's done it, the people he's beaten. Lopez is a single weight category operator, but he beat Lomachenko, who was previously in my top 3. So that's why he goes in on the grounds of that single but huge achievement. With someone like Crawford, for me, he hasn't done enough recently at welterweight to crack that top 3. His super lightweight work, obviously, is stellar, and he won a world title at lightweight too. And that counts, and it will always count because he's not going to go back down to those weights. but he hasn't done anything big at welterweight yet. He's won a world title, but he's not done anything really big. Spence, I would put above Crawford at welterweight because he's done more at welterweight, but then he doesn't have the work in the other weights. So those two would be outside my top three for that reason, really. And someone like Usyk is quite an interesting case too, because brilliant at cruiserweight, unified the division, fantastic, but he's got to do something a bit more than he has yet at heavyweight for me to put him in any kind of pound for pound list. So you'll probably be in a few people's, and again, it's arguable, but yeah, my three's Canelo, Inoue, and Lopez.
You know, I do think that's a good point about Crawford, actually, because when you look at what Crawford's done, he has done it at super lightweight. Coming up to welterweight, we don't even know if he's going to be able to fight the 4-5 fighters that are with Al Heyman. The top 4-5 fighters are with Al Heyman. So it's a bit of a messy situation for Terence Crawford, unfortunately, at this present time. Hopefully something happens and we can see all these big fights happening in the welterweight division, especially between him and Errol Spence. But Umar, let's talk about pound for pound then. Who's your top three?
By the way, apologies. I had some sort of connection issue, so I missed the last 2 minutes or so of what I said.
It was great stuff as well.
You missed it all, mate.
Man, no doubt with you guys on the panel. Jeez.
Umar, so we were talking about pound for pound listings. Andy's given his. He said Canelo, Inoue, and Teofimo Lopez as the top three. Who's your top three pound for pound?
I can see why he said Lopez because he beat Lomachenko, but Lomachenko was always a questionable top three for me, because of the opponents he was fighting and when he was fighting them. But I would say Canelo's undoubtedly number one. I've always said this actually, even before his last fight, and people would argue with me, but Canelo's undoubtedly number one.
Yep. Number
two, I'll go for Crawford. And number three. Number three, I don't know. I'll just say number one Canelo, number two Crawford. Can I sit on the fence with that?
You can, but actually, I'm going to actually then pull out Andy's argument, which is a valid argument, and I'm going to present that forward to yourself. Is that Crawford did all his work, or did his unified the division at super lightweight? Since he's come to welterweight, he's not had the opportunity. He's not fought the fighters to sort of make a dent in the welterweight division. So therefore, in current times, he hasn't done much in regards to winning a world title or whatever needs to happen for him to elevate himself in this division. What do you make of that argument?
I think most things are situational, so the answer is hardly ever black and white. And with Crawford's situation, when he was able to unify the 140 division, he did that, and then he moved up to 147. And it's unfortunate that he's with Top Rank and all the guys that everyone wants him to fight are with PBC and now Heyman. So, I mean, with that being said, he's done what he's supposed to do with everyone he's boxed so far at welterweight and dominated convincingly. So it's just a matter of, I think he gets a bye for that one until when he gets to fight the people that were asking for him to fight. That'll be my response to that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's always a bit of a discrepancy in how people judge pound for pound as well, because it is mythical. Obviously, it doesn't help, but it's whether you base it on ability and potential as a result of that ability, or whether you base it on performance and results. And I think from us, if we're going to base it on performance and results, and that's why you guys have both got Canelo definitely as your number one, and I would have him number one as well, because no one has achieved what he's achieved through the weights, beaten the quality of opposition that he has. But then if you're going on ability, there's probably a lot of people that we're not even talking about in the top three that would otherwise be there.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But those people, talking about those people, will be even more hypothetical than the pound for pound rankings are. So when you're talking about something that's already complex, I think part of the aim is to keep it as simple as possible. So again, we go by ability or technical ability and actual, achievements in the ring. And for those reasons, again, I've got Canelo. And Another thing as well that people speak often about, I think I might have heard Andy talking about earlier, but the connection wasn't great, is when people compare people from different weights. But then I think by definition, that's the whole point of having the pound for pound. It's that we know that they probably won't box each other, but observing how they box and how they perform against their peers. So the way I look at the pound for pound ranking really is rate every fighter individually out of 100, right? And whoever has the highest ratings is pound for pound number one. So if you say that this heavyweight fighter is rated based on the performance and ability 70 out of 100, or no, let's be a bit fair, 85 out of 100, and then you've got a lightweight who you've rated 92 out of 100, then that lightweight who's 92 out of 100 goes higher on the pound for pound rankings than the heavyweight.
This is giving me a great idea to do some boxing top trumps.
Yeah,
What's that?
Left field, but
no, that'd be great. That'd be great. That's a good system, and that's more what I was talking about when I said that you need to kind of look at technical ability and boxing technique and that kind of thing to make an evaluation of who is, in that regard, better than who. And with that in mind, one fighter I didn't mention who would be very close to my top three is Fury, because heavyweights, I would always give heavyweights a pass for not having boxed in multiple divisions, because he can't, to produce sheer size, he can't do it. But you look at his technical boxing ability, coupled with massive wins, and he has to be very close to a top three. I think he'd certainly be very close to mine.
I was actually going to ask that about Tyson Fury, but Umar, then going off that, Tyson Fury, would he then drop into your number three? Do you think he's that fighter that fits your number three, because you're struggling at this present time?
I am struggling, and honestly, I woke up, I did some prayers, I meditated, and I jumped on this call, so I haven't had much time to think. I won't want to say something and then regret after. But I could see Tyson being in the top 500%, and I could also, I could see an argument for Teofimo. I could see Inoue is one that a lot of people agree about. Tyson Fury is another, and there are a few other fighters up there who I think have been doing really good, and I would have to give it a lot of thought. As you guys can tell, I think about what I say. So.
Cool. There's always like a debate between Fury and Joshua supporters who has the better resume, because there's no doubt Fury's got the better standout wins with those away victories over Wilder and Klitschko. But then a lot of people say, well, Joshua's fought a wider range of kind of B+ level fighters. So then whose resume is better overall? Andy, what do you think?
I've got Fury ahead of Joshua in the heavyweight rankings because he's had bigger wins. And Eddie Hearn's argument that I saw a few weeks ago, as you mentioned, is that Joshua's boxed more top 10 heavyweights. He has. That's true when you look through the record. But I think it is about your biggest wins. What level have you proven yourself to be at? And Fury went to Germany and beat Vladimir Klitschko, who hadn't lost in nearly 10 years, to win the unified titles. And then he went to America and smashed Deontay Wilder to pieces, which at the time was and will remain absolutely sensational. So the fact that Joshua has beaten more top 10 heavyweights than Fury is not something I would deny. And Joshua's done spectacularly well, and I think he's still improving. But I think on the basis of their biggest wins, I'd have to put Fury ahead of him. Had he not beaten Wilder earlier in the year, or had he beaten, say, somebody else, then I wouldn't, because his win against Klitschko was quite a long time ago. But that win against Wilder, and even the draw against Wilder the first time, in a way, if this makes sense, kind of reactivates the win against Klitschko as still counting for a lot. Because prior to that, you could argue, and I did, because I would have taken him out of any rankings when he was inactive for such a long time, that those previous achievements don't get erased from history, but from the point of view of ranking him, they expire. And that Klitschko win had expired, but then he came back and he gave it a new lease of life. So, I mean, I agree with both, but Joshua's resume, top 10 wins is better, but Fury's best wins are better, and I prefer his best wins.
I've got a question for Umar, given we've all got Canelo as our #1 pound for pound, and he's currently in your weight class. Who's the biggest threat to Canelo? Who's got the most chance of beating him out of the guys between, I don't know, 160 and 175?
Oh wow. So 175, you've got some animals in there, and I think there's a good reason why Canelo only went there to fight Kovalev and came back down to 168. So I think the guys, Beterbiev and the likes at 175 would give him lots of problems. At 168, I see Billy Joe being the only, person in the top 10 right now who troubles Canelo, because so you've got David Benavidez who's good, but his opponents have been questionable, and he seems to have a lot of flaws in his game. That being said, there are a lot of fighters who, from the outside, look like they aren't doing much, and then when you're in there with them, it's a whole different thing. So maybe he's one of them. I don't know. I just don't think, though, he hasn't had a performance yet, or a victory yet that's made us think, okay, now he's arrived. He's still, as much as he's a world champion, he's still sort of like a prospect, if that makes sense. A very similar thing goes with Caleb Plant. He's very slick, lively guy. I actually really like Caleb Plant as a fighter. So as you guys can hear, the way I'm speaking about people in my own weight division, I'm a massive boxing fan as well.
Yeah.
But I'll still fight any one of these guys, like in a heartbeat. So Caleb Plant's got a lot going for him. I just don't think that it's enough to trouble the boxing IQ of Canelo and the Reynoso brothers, the Reynoso family, sorry, because part of their strength seems to be in being able to break a fighter down. I mean, during analysis, and then having a game plan, an effective game plan that nullifies what that fighter does best and exploit the weaknesses. I mean, when you see Canelo gave up so much against Smith, who we tout to be very good. And look how well he nullified what Smith was doing. He even nullified him to a point where Smith wasn't punching at times. And there's no accident in there. There are a lot of nuances in what Canelo does, which is why I've got him at #1. So I'm going on a bit now, aren't I? In short, at super middleweight, it'll be Billy Joe Saunders, because Billy Joe Saunders, I've had boxing conversations with him, and the guy, he knows boxing very, very well. And if anyone's going to be able to pick the holes out of Canelo and make him and his team have to step up their approach to a fight, it's going to be Billy Joe. But then at 175, you've just got some guys that are just beasts. I don't think they'll be as bothered or fazed by the punches that Canelo would hit him with. And then at the same time, when they hit him back, he's going to have to respect what he's getting hit with. I know he's taking punches from Golovkin, but these guys are 2 weight divisions up from Golovkin, and a lot of them are just absolute monsters.